WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. Big thanks to all of our sponsors, including some of our new 2020 sponsors, including our friends at Raskin Global. My friend Leonard Raskin having great events over there, great education about how to make the most of your money and prepare for your future. Big appreciation to Raskin Global, as well as our friends at Liberty Pure. I've drank all the water, and I have 2 cases of it in the trunk of the car. Usually I have a water here. I don't. Instead, I have the Maryland the lava lamp here. It hasn't gone well, Court, ever since I got the lava lamp. Hopefully it brings us better mojo here in the coming weeks with the gold magma lamp from Sporticulture. Luke Jones joins us now to discuss the aftermath of New Jersey and the swamps of Jersey. Dude, what's happened to the Terps? I mean, this is suddenly, right when it became fun and we all kind of got glued in, it's not fun anymore.
It's the whole here we go again thing, right? I mean, it really is. And look, I think it's simplistic just to say it's that and just to put it all on Mark Turgeon, although I'm certainly not going to just give him a free pass. I've been critical of him in the past. But I think when you look at what happened on Tuesday night, the first thing you point to is how poorly they shot the basketball, right? They were 2 for 16 from 3 in the first half. They continued to go to that well, and then by the time you fall behind 20 points, you kind of have to shoot threes at that point to try to come back.
It's kind of like the run-and-shoot offense, right? You punt a couple times, and then all of a sudden, you're really the run-and-shoot offense, right?
Right. I mean, it's that team that you say they abandoned the run too early. People talked about the Ravens playoff game, and then, well, in the fourth quarter when you're down 3 scores, you have to throw the ball. So, but I think for me what's more concerning, because let's face it, as much as the expectations were there for this to be a good three-point shooting team, it just really hasn't been that good of a three-point shooting team this year. I mean, I think they, after Tuesday's loss, they're tied for 12th in the Big Ten in three-point shooting percentage. And that's certainly, I mean, Tuesday night was a big example of, really struggling in that department, and they're usually not that bad. But you're going to have some nights like that. What concerns me, Nestor, and we talked about this a little bit after the Michigan State loss, is what had been the calling card of this team over the course of the last few months. It's been their defense. They've been very sound defensively. They've been really tough in that department, and that's been their bread and butter. Well, you look over the last 4 games, which, by the way, a Daryl Morcell last-second, almost miracle three-point shot at Minnesota is what separates them from a 4-game losing streak right now. But you look at those 4 games, and I'd even look at a couple games here and there before that, their defense hasn't been there. They've allowed 73 or more points in 4 straight games, and at the collegiate level, that's just not very good. You look at a team like Rutgers. I mean, how do they like to play? Certainly, they love their home court advantage, which they took full advantage of on Tuesday night. It was a great atmosphere at the rack, as it tends to be, despite the fact that that's a pretty nondescript program.
Dude, by the way, I almost felt like we should have jumped in the car Tuesday. That looked like fun. That looked like the night we spent in Purdue, right? I mean, just looked like a good time.
Well, it's fun from the standpoint of there's no cachet, there's no prestige whatsoever with that program. So that's
1991. You go find Joe Boylan out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. We had him on. 1991's the last time they made the tournament, right?
Yeah, and in recent years, and we've seen this, I mean, they've played Maryland really tough over the last few years. They haven't been a complete doormat like you typically think of a Rutgers program as being, but they clearly have not been Duke. They're certainly not Michigan State or Michigan or Indiana or Purdue. But you knew that was going to be a tough environment. But when you look at how that game was going to play out, Rutgers, they're not very good offensively. They were going to want to play kind of an ugly brand of low-scoring basketball. And that's what we saw in the first half. But for that team to finish with 78 points, that's not a good defensive performance. And you look at how Maryland was bullied inside, and you just look at that, and that's where we come back to an issue that we've talked about for quite some time, depth. And we're now into March, and we're now 19 games into the Big Ten Conference with the regular season finale, of course, being this weekend against Michigan. And when you're talking about a lack of depth and potentially asking about fatigue, what's one of the things that starts to wane, maybe even perhaps some other aspects of the game? Your defense isn't as consistent. So that's where I look at that, which has been their bread and butter. It's been their calling card, their defense, and how that's gone by the wayside. And that's something that should be there night in and night out. You're going to have,
but defending the three against a team that allegedly didn't shoot the three well. I mean, they were sinking shots early, and it was almost like some of the Terps guys' jaws were like, they're not supposed to be able to shoot like this. And that's kind of what the story was at Rutgers early in the night. Defensing, it's one thing, but they're not supposed to be good at it. And when they are for 10 minutes, you look up and you're losing by 15 points.
Yeah, but it wasn't just the 3-point line. I mean, Rutgers got to the basket a heck of a lot, and that's something that shouldn't happen. If you're a team that's a true top 10 team and has played defense the way that they've played for most of the season, that just shouldn't happen. So, I mean, yeah, they hit some 3-point shots early, and certainly that was big for Rutgers. But you just look at Maryland defensively, and it hasn't been the same for them these last few games. And when you're talking about something that has been your strength, that has been your identity, and suddenly it's not there anymore when you've given up 73 or more in 4 straight games, that's alarming. That's concerning. That's where I don't think it's an effort thing as much, although certainly their energy level was not there on Tuesday night, and certainly you could question the effort a little bit. But in general, I'm much more concerned that it's a fatigue issue because, let's face it, I mean, we've talked about it a lot. Team relies on 6 players night in and night out. And, yeah, they're happy if they can get a few useful minutes from Ricky Lindo or Hakeem Hart recently, although he certainly wasn't doing them any favors with his shooting the basketball. Sorrell Smith finally got some run for the first time in a while and gave them a little bit of juice, so maybe we see a little bit more of him as we close out the regular season here and Maryland goes to the Big Ten tournament. But when you only have one guy off the bench that is going to play, boy, that just doesn't give you a whole lot of margin for error from the standpoint of knowing that of those 6 that you rely on, not all 6 are going to play their best basketball every night. So what you end up seeing is what we've seen over the last couple weeks where Jalen Smith, if he gets into foul trouble like we've seen him do, although that wasn't the case on Tuesday night, and he played well, but Anthony Cowan, he's had some shooting woes here over the last 3-4 games, and we've talked a lot about how critical it is for them to get some big contributions from either Wiggins or Ayala, and I'll throw Daryl Morcell in there. And, well, they didn't get those major scoring contributions from those guys in that regard. So it's great to have an inside-out combination like Cowan and Jalen Smith, but you really need that third option to step forward for you consistently. And when it's been Aaron Wiggins or when it's been Ayala coming out of his kind of season-long shooting funk that he's had, or whether it's Daryl Morcell getting to the basket a little more frequently, they tend to be really tough to beat then. But what did you see on Tuesday night? Cowan bounced back, looked much better than he'd looked in some recent games. And Jalen Smith, usually when they go inside to him and try to get him close to the basket, it goes well. But they didn't get anything from anyone else. And you couple that with how much they struggled defensively, and it adds
well, the
up
kid from Baltimore, right? I mean, we talk about Maryland with the Baltimore kids. I mean, Montez Mathis was a story in the game, especially early, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just said, Daryl Morcell, he's not someone that you're counting on to hit outside shots like he did to beat Minnesota, but he's another guy that go to the basket a little more. I think what was frustrating for me, you're going to have some nights where you just shoot miserably from the outside. And, again, this isn't a great outside shooting team, despite what expectations might have been in that regard. The numbers don't lie. They're tied for 12th in the Big Ten in that regard. But when you see some of the success that they had going inside, when they did do it, that's when you ask, why do you keep settling? And it's great to, I understand analytics basketball in terms of the three-point shot, and 3 is more than 2. That's common logic, but you got to hit those shots for that to matter. You got to hit those shots for that strategy to pay off, and Maryland wasn't doing that. So definitely would have liked to see them go inside more. I still think you could look at how that game played out and say, Jalen Smith's got to get more than 11 shots, and 3 of those.
Well, we've been saying that for a week now, right? I mean, he's a lottery pick. You got to get him the ball.
Exactly. So it's one thing to just say, well, you shot 6 for 32 from outside, but my question would be, well, why'd you shoot it 32 times from the outside? And more specifically, why 16 times in the first half? Second half, when it's turning into a boat race and you're way behind, and yeah, you got to hit threes. I mean, that's going to be your chance. Just like a team, Lamar Jackson's going to throw it 60-plus times when you're in the fourth quarter and you're down 3 scores.
And it probably won't go any better than when Joe Flacco threw it 60 times.
Yeah, typically, yeah, you're going to lose. That's why you fall behind 20 usually, you're going to lose.
Only Vinny Testaverde could do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
and we lost a lot, too, yeah.
Yeah, it's rare. So, but you do look at that first half, and you look at where they were from a shooting percentage inside 3 and where they were from beyond the arc, which was 2 for 16, and you can certainly ask, why aren't you going inside more to Jalen Smith? I mean, not as though Jalen Smith was in foul trouble. He played 35 minutes. So this wasn't a case where he picked up 2 quick fouls and was on the bench, and Maryland's trying to just navigate through the first half and protect him. So there are definitely some issues in that regard where you can point to Mark Turgeon and say, what exactly happened here? But I said it to you after the Michigan State game. As disappointing as it was, I mean, Michigan State's playing really well. Look at what they did against Penn State. They were down big at halftime. They came back and won pretty handily. I mean, it's a real testament to them and how they're playing. But I thought it was so going to be key as far as how Maryland responded, knowing that the RAC's a tough place to play, knowing that Rutgers, despite some recent struggles, still a pretty decent basketball team and a team that had a lot to play for. I thought this was an under-the-hood kind of game for Maryland, and wasn't pretty when you looked under the hood as far as what happened. So I don't think it's time to just say, well, it's over, but I can understand people feeling that way, and that's why a few weeks ago when we were saying at that point, it's time to start buying into this team, there were a lot of people reluctant, and, well...
they were reluctant because it wasn't like the Ravens giving beatdowns to the Rams on Monday Night Football. They were winning by coming back and barely winning and having long stretches where they didn't play well, or didn't shoot well, as you pointed out, or didn't have the energy well, or didn't depth well, or somebody got into foul trouble and whoever came off the bench, it didn't go well. So. But they won games, right? So I had said all along they're the most maligned top 10 team in the country because even when they're winning games against Rutgers, they're scoring 56 points doing it, right? And impressive victories? I don't know. I mean, is it impressive that you beat Iowa or Illinois? I don't know. But they didn't have that sort of cachet that they were outdistancing themselves with talent or winning by 20 points every night or being a dominant team. They weren't that even during that winning streak for me.
To a degree, but...
They beat Nebraska by a bucket, right? I mean, come on.
No, I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, that's the Big Ten this year.
Well, you're winning, right?
This is a really tough conference. I mean, going into Tuesday night, I believe 8 teams in the top 25. I mean, there aren't conferences that can say that. And as much as we are romantic about the ACC is not the Big Ten this year. I mean, it's just not. This is a down year for that conference, just to use for one example.
Yeah, I want to play North Carolina in a tournament.
Yeah, exactly. Syracuse or some other teams. Virginia's not certainly not what they were a year ago.
Beating up your alma mater like that, it's serious. I mean, I've never heard you speak of the Orange in that fashion, man.
This year, But I think you even look at what happened on Tuesday night. I mean, Penn State up 15 at halftime over Michigan State at home, and you saw what happened to them. Iowa playing at home, and they lost to Purdue by 9. I mean, and we're down huge in the first half. So some of it's just the conference, and I know a lot of people that are frustrated right now and are saying, here we go again, same old Mark Turgeon Terps.
But they've looked bad for two. You know, I mean, they haven't looked competitive the last. I mean, the Michigan State game, okay, they came back out of the hole early, but I think the concern is they weren't beating teams the way they've been beaten the last couple nights. You know, that they did not look dominant, and to be out of these games the way they were, and Turgeon just unloading the bench at the end. I got to think that, you know, however they traveled back from Piscataway on Tuesday night, I would think things aren't going to go well in College Park the next couple of days, even in beating Michigan, because I think they put themselves in a position next week where they have to go to Indianapolis and play a couple of days in order to be thinking about a 2-line again, right? I mean, this thing's starting to slide down toward they lose to Michigan and take a facer next week. They might be a 4.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, so much of this depends on what happens with everyone else. And there's been a lot of volatility in college basketball this year. I know we tend to just focus in on Maryland and say, okay, this is what's happened to them.
Well, they're not the only team that had a bad week.
Again, just look at the top 15 every single week, and you see a lot of movement, a lot of losing. So, and I'm not excusing Mark Turgeon and the Terps by saying that. I have concerns. And to your point, I don't care so much about when they were winning, and maybe some of those wins didn't look overwhelming, but how they played over the last 4 games. I saw Patrick Stevens of The Athletic tweeted it out after Tuesday night's loss. Maryland, over the last 4 games, they'd had a lead for 5 minutes and 51 seconds over the last 4 games, and that's one game in which they won, the Minnesota game, which they trailed the entire way.
So that's 6 minutes out of 160 minutes.
Yeah, so you're talking about a large chunk of that time, they were down 10 plus. So I'm totally in agreement over these last 4 games. I'm talking more so about probably no real need to diminish what they were doing before that, because it is a really tough conference. But you see the cracks, and I'll continue to come back to their defense. I mean, the 3-point shooting was obvious on Tuesday night. I mean, you got to shoot like that, you're not going to beat anyone. But where they've been from a defensive standpoint, where they were all year and what they've done over the last couple of weeks, that's where people will question the effort. And yeah, the effort, the energy level was lacking Tuesday night. Rutgers just had way more urgency to their game. But I'm more concerned that this is more a product of 19 games into the Big Ten Conference and you're 6 deep. And you played a lot of close games, to your point, even when they were winning. Is it starting to catch up to them now? And that's where you look at this thing and look. I mean, double bye. They're not going to be in a position where they have to play 5 days in a row or anything like that. But you do wonder whether it's the Big Ten tournament or NCAA tournament, where you're not playing back consecutive days, but you're playing 2 games in 3 days. So that's where you do wonder, where is the fatigue setting in? Is the lack of depth finally catching up to them? And when you couple that with just not making shots, yeah, you're going to lose to anyone that's worth their salt. So I think what you have to do if you're Mark Turgeon, one, I think this team does need some rest. I don't think the answer coming back from Rutgers Tuesday night is to have these guys in the gym at 7 a.m. Wednesday. But I think it's clear they need to get back to what they do best, and that's really defending. And if they do that, I think the shots will start to fall, and you'll see this team right itself a little bit here. And as far as NCAA seeding goes, I saw some bracketologists talking about how the loss to Rutgers probably dropped Maryland to the 3 line. Certainly they can still get back up to the 2 with a strong finish here, a good showing in the Big Ten tournament. But it's not that long ago. It's just a couple weeks ago when they were at Ohio State, where there had been so much talk that if they had beaten the Buckeyes, they would have been in line for a number 1 seed at that point. And, well, they've lost 3 of 4, and they needed a Daryl Morcell miracle shot to win that one game over those last 4. So this is a team that's searching for it right now, and it's not a good thing to be saying when you're talking about the first week of March, and that's where
this isn't fun anymore. I go back to that. I was having a good time. You know what I mean? I was even having a good time, like, in front of the TV, watching them play at Rutgers and thinking, well, I mean, this has some energy. This is this is better than the Orioles games are going to be 2 months from now. I mean, from an excitement level,
Pretty
right?
low bar there.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I'm a sports guy, and I've given up on hockey ever since Leon just didn't bring the cup to Baltimore and lied to me, after 30 years of saying they were going to do that. So why should I support them? It does say Maryland on it, right? I live in Maryland, my life. So I'm trying to, like, get a little spirit for, and the other thing when you sort of big brothered me after the loss to the Titans and said, man, the Ravens are going to go back to Tampa and they're going to win in Tampa. I thought, man, the Terps can go back to Atlanta and win in Atlanta. And then they start winning and then they're number 7. And, in the last couple of weeks, I sort of bought in. And I think anybody who bought in and has watched the last 4 games, if these are the only 4 games you've watched, oh my God, right?
Yeah, sure.
You'd wonder what the hell all the hype's about.
Yeah, and that's fair. And that's where some of the critics will come back to this and say, same old Terps, same old Mark Turgeon. And they have a chance to prove all them wrong and not necessarily validate where they were before, but to just put yourself back in position where you have a chance to make a run in March. But they continue to defend the way that they have over the last 4 games, or not defend, I should say, then it'll be an early exit. And it won't be anything to write home about. It might be a win the first round and then you're out in the round of 32 kind of situation, which when you consider where this team has been in the top 10 for weeks now, then that's going to feel very lacking. That's going to feel not good enough. And that's where Turgeon's got to figure out how to get this team back on track, and they need some rest. I certainly think that factors in, but you still continue to look, and they're 6 deep. If there is one positive to take away from Tuesday night, it is that Sorrell Smith got back on the floor, played with some energy. I mean, he's someone who had completely wasn't even playing. They were playing Hakeem Hart and Joshua Tomaic over him. So, is that something where maybe he's got some juice that he can bring them off the bench that they really need? We'll see. We'll see on Sunday against Michigan, but there were very few positives to take away from what happened on Tuesday night. I mean, just a game where they were really outclassed by Rutgers and not nearly as close as an 11-point final would indicate.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. We are discussing the Ravens as well as the Orioles up in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day. The morning newspaper delivers digitally each and every morning. You can read Luke's thoughts on the Ravens Combine and free agency coming next week, as well as a collective bargaining agreement. All of that stuff swirling around. Lots of football conversations. Talked to Mike Tenier, Eric Edholm this week. John Feinstein with a great conversation about his new book and UMBC. Lots of stuff going on around here, including Baltimore Positive. Ted Venetoulis, our big guest this week, as well as Sheila Dixon on Thursday from Fadley's, and Frank Kelly, our dear friend from Kelly & Associates. Monday night, the FCA Big Banquet with Ed Reed, Hall of Famer Ed Reed. We'll talk to Frank Kelly about that and more. April the 14th, putting together a huge mayoral forum. Keep the afternoon free from 11 until 1 on Tuesday, April the 14th. We're going to be live streaming and talking about the future of our city, which is super important. I ran into T.J. Smith the other day having lunch down at Cross Street. Baltimore's coming back to life. We're part of it. We're Baltimore Positive around here. Nasty at WNST.net for criticism, but I prefer praise. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Terrapins basketball and March Madness.